On September 7, 1996, 4 bullets ended the most influential rapper alive. The shooter was known. The witnesses stayed silent. This is the rise and fall of Tupac Shakur. The muzzle flashes on Flamingo Road illuminated a conspiracy of absolute silence. In the minutes after the gunfire, a wall of non-cooperation went up around the Bleeding Star. On the Strip, hundreds of onlookers stood frozen. Yet, when investigators arrived, the streets offered nothing but cold stares. This was not a failure of police work. It was a demonstration of a street code that governed survival. Whispers filled the clubs and back alleys of Los Angeles, naming names and detailing motives, while the official record remained blank. The streets knew the truth, but the streets protected their own. To understand why those voices stayed quiet, the timeline pulls back from the neon lights of Las Vegas, returning to the moments where the danger first took root. Tupac Amaru Shakur entered the world on June 16, 1971, in East Harlem, born into a battle that had already begun. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was a prominent member of the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. Just over a month before his birth, she stood in a courtroom, pregnant and facing a potential 300-year sentence as part of the Panther 21 conspiracy trial. Defending herself with sharp intellect and fierce resolve, she won her acquittal. This environment of high-stakes resistance and survival became Tupac's cradle. The household was defined by poverty, but rich in radical ideology. There was no separation between the personal and the political. From his earliest days, he listened to conversations about systemic oppression, FBI surveillance, and community defense. The kitchen table was a forum for revolutionary strategy, and Afeni was its ideological core. Growing up in the shadows of Harlem's tenements, Tupac absorbed the lessons of the Panther movement. He saw the stark contrast between the ideals of the revolution and the reality of a family struggling to pay rent. The constant threat of eviction and the hunger of poverty did not break Afeni's spirit. Instead, it sharpened her son's focus. He watched his mother confront a society that viewed her activism as a threat, learning early that survival required a voice. Before he ever picked up a microphone or wrote a verse, his mother's struggles instilled in him an acute awareness of injustice. This political legacy did not just influence his character, it defined the lens through which he viewed the world. In 1984, the family relocated to Maryland, leading to Tupac's enrollment at the Baltimore School for the Arts in 1986. This institution became the training ground where raw survival instincts became deliberate, artistic craft. He threw himself into acting, poetry, and classical theater, studying everything from Shakespearean drama to ballet. On these stages, the chaotic lessons of his Harlem childhood found structure. He was not merely expressing himself, he was learning how to command space, manipulate emotion, and weaponize language. His early creative identity took shape through a fusion of revolutionary protest and stark, disarming vulnerability. One moment, he was writing radical poetry. The next, he was portraying tragic figures with a depth that stunned his instructors. This training separated him from the commercialized, manufactured acts of the music industry. His talent felt earned, chiseled out of daily discipline and natural charisma. Yet, this period established a sharp contrast between the private teenager and the public force he was rapidly becoming. Privately, he remained a kid navigating poverty and the social decay of the late 1980s urban environment. Publicly, he was developing a fierce presence that made him impossible to ignore. He discovered how to project pain, how to voice collective anger, and how to hold an audience completely captive. When the family moved to the West Coast in 1988, Tupac did not arrive as an amateur seeking a break. He arrived as a trained performer possessing both the ideological fury of his Panther heritage and the technical precision of a stage actor. The voice was honed, and the explosive public rise that followed was the direct result of a gift refined under pressure. On February 8, 1995, a New York court sentenced Tupac Shakur to up to 4.5 years for sexual abuse. A month later, authorities transferred him to Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, a maximum security prison near the Canadian border. The state cell became an intense pressure cooker. Behind the stone walls, isolation fed his anger while his debts mounted. Then came Marion Shuge Knight. The chief executive officer of Death Row Records saw an opportunity. On October 12, 1995, Knight posted a $1.4 million bail bond to secure Tupac's release. But this was no rescue mission. It was a calculated business transaction. In exchange for his liberty, Tupac signed a contract obligating him to deliver 3 albums to Death Row. As he walked out of Clinton Correctional, Tupac was free from state custody, but legally bound to a dangerous street empire. The deal traded his prison uniform for an alliance with a label heavily aligned with mob Piru Bloods. This contract did not bring peace. Instead, it tied his voice directly to Death Row's financial interests and street conflicts. Freedom came at the cost of ultimate vulnerability, locking him into a system of power and debt that would follow him all the way to Flamingo Road. Inside the offices of Death Row Records, the distinction between a multi-million-dollar music business and an active street gang did not exist. By signing the contract to secure his freedom, Tupac entered an environment where security guards carried police badges in one hand and gang affiliations in the other. Suge Knight operated the label through raw intimidation, using mob Piru Bloods to enforce loyalty and collect debts. For Tupac, this partnership offered unmatched creative power, but it functioned as a gilded cage. He was now the primary engine of a commercial powerhouse, working at a relentless pace. Inside Can-Am Studios in Tarzana, he recorded day and night, producing dozens of tracks that would form hip-hop's first double-disc album. Yet, the immense wealth generated by these sessions did not flow directly into his pockets. The profits were funneled back to the label to recoup the $1.4 million in bail, keeping him locked in a cycle of financial dependence. The music grew faster, louder, and increasingly hostile. His lyrics absorbed the real-world violence of his new inner circle, transforming his art into a front-line weapon. He was no longer the vulnerable social commentator of his early career. He was now the public general of a West Coast empire. His public persona hardened, making him more confrontational and far more exposed. As the album sold by the millions, the danger grew. Armed gang members replaced professional security details. Death Row gave Tupac the fame and resources he had long sought, but it also stripped away his safety. He was now surrounded by targets, fully exposed to street rivalries that had nothing to do with music. On November 30th, 1994, the paranoia became physical reality. Tupac walked into the lobby of Quad Recording Studios at 723 7th Avenue in Manhattan, expecting a routine session. Instead, 3 men in camouflage fatigues drew their weapons and ordered everyone to the floor. In the frantic struggle, 5 bullets tore into Tupac, striking his thigh, his hand, his scrotum, and grazing his head. He survived the ambush, but his trust was permanently shattered. The violence transformed a rising star's wariness into an absolute, hardened suspicion. From his hospital bed, Tupac pointed his finger directly at his former friends. He publicly accused Bad Boy Records affiliates, including Sean Puffy Combs and manager James Rosemond, known as Jimmy Henchman, of orchestrating the robbery. The accusation ended any chance of peace. By naming his rivals, Tupac drew a permanent line in the sand, turning personal betrayal into an open, public war. The accusation turned former friends into targets. In New York, Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G. and Bad Boy Records founder Sean Combs found themselves framed as the opposition. What began as a personal fallout quickly grew into an industry-wide conflict. On June 4, 1996, Tupac launched a direct strike with the release of the track Hit 'Em Up. This was an open threat. The lyrics targeted Biggie and the entire Bad Boy roster with explicit, violent threats of retaliation. The media ran with the conflict. Magazines like The Source and Vibe put the face of each artist on their covers, turning a private grudge into an inescapable national spectacle. Every headline fueled the anger, driving up magazine sales while pushing the temperature to a boiling point. To the public, it was entertainment. But on the streets, the division was real. The musical rivalry had morphed into a corporate Cold War, backed by active street gangs on both coasts. Every public appearance became a security nightmare. The music industry had built a machine of violence, and the people inside it knew the next confrontation would not end in a recording studio. On September 7, 1996, the energy in Las Vegas centered on the MGM Grand, where Mike Tyson defeated Bruce Seldon in under 2 minutes. As the massive crowd spilled out into the desert night, Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight bypassed the post-fight chaos, climbing into a black BMW 750 sedan. Knight took the wheel. Tupac sat in the passenger seat. They drove east, navigating the heavy traffic of the Strip before turning onto Flamingo Road. At 11:15 p.m., the BMW came to a halt at a red light at the intersection of Koval Lane, surrounded by other cars leaving the arena. Suddenly, a white Cadillac slipped through the lanes, pulling up directly along the passenger side of the BMW. In a fraction of a second, an arm extended from the rear window. Gunfire erupted. 4 .40 caliber rounds tore through the passenger door, striking Tupac in the chest, thigh, and arm. Shrapnel grazed Knight's head. The white Cadillac accelerated, disappearing into the night before any of the surrounding drivers could react. The intersection became a crime scene of scattered glass, blood-stained leather, and a sudden, violent silence. It was the moment where the music stopped, leaving investigators with a puzzle of ballistics, trajectories, and physical evidence. Within hours of the shooting, one name dominated street-level intelligence: Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. A member of the Compton Southside Crips, Anderson had been beaten by Tupac and death row associates in the MGM Grand Lobby just hours earlier. Police affidavits soon named him as the primary suspect, the man believed to be pulling the trigger from the back of the white Cadillac. Anderson denied any involvement, and the lack of cooperative witnesses prevented charges. He took his secrets to the grave when he was killed in a Compton shootout in 1998. Decades later, the focus shifted to Anderson's uncle, Dwayne Keith D. Davis. In his 2019 memoir, Davis admitted to sitting in the front passenger seat of the Cadillac that night, describing how he coordinated the attack and handed the weapon to the back seat. This self-incrimination led to his arrest and a first-degree murder charge in 2023, bringing a formal prosecution to a street theory that had circulated for 27 years. Yet, the path to a conviction in 1996 was permanently severed just 2 months after the shooting. 19-year-old Yafu Fula, a member of Tupac's group, the Outlaws, was riding in the vehicle directly behind the black BMW. Fula told police he could positively identify the shooter. But on November 13, 1996, before detectives could secure his formal testimony, Fula was found shot to death in a New Jersey housing project. With his death, the investigation's most direct link to the killer vanished, leaving behind only whispers, unresolved leads, and a silence that remained unbroken. The silence that paralyzed the investigation was reinforced by systemic failures on the ground. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department did not offer protective custody or relocation to Yafu Fula or the other witnesses in Tupac's entourage, leaving them exposed to immediate retaliation. Street codes and green light threats of violence shut down cooperation before it could start. In the 1990s, Nevada gang-related homicides had a clearance rate of just 45% compared to 70% for other crimes. This case fell directly into that statistical void. Detectives failed to coordinate effectively with the LAPD, missing essential intelligence on the Compton gang war that had spilled onto the Strip. The .40 caliber Glock 22 used in the drive-by was never recovered, and the crime scene itself was left unsecured, letting physical evidence slip away. While the 2023 indictment of Dwayne Davis brought a late measure of legal movement, it came nearly 3 decades after the trail went cold. The murder of Tupac Shakur remains unresolved in any definitive public sense. An incomplete investigation where institutional missteps and street-level fear guaranteed the truth would remain buried. An entire generation was left with a cultural icon lost and a justice system that could only offer excuses. Subscribe for more dark hip-hop crime stories. Decades later, the silence surrounding that Las Vegas Strip remains deafening. Modern hip-hop still bleeds from the same cycles of violence and betrayal that claimed his life. Tupac's voice is immortal, but the code of silence that buried the truth still rules the shadows. Some secrets are designed to stay dead. Subscribe to uncover more dark chapters of music history.